This is the camera that so many people still love, the Nikon D700, a full-frame DSLR from 2008. Remember DSLRs? These are the cameras that do this. Is it even possible to take half-decent photos on a Nikon D700? Spoiler alert, yes. Not only that, many photographers still use it, 16 years after its release. It's praised for its mythical film-like image quality, organic-looking noise. Some say it's built like a tank, and overall just a pleasure to use that almost no modern camera can match. I've had so much praise about this camera that I just had to check it myself. So let's dive in, see if it's really that good. Nikon D700 was Nikon's first affordable full-frame camera, with great low-light performance at that time. It was basically a stripped-down version of the professional Nikon D3, but still intended for serious use. There are many rumors about the D700 sensor circling around. Some say it was one of a kind with a special color filter array. I don't think that was the case, although according to many sources, it was the last full-frame sensor produced by Nikon before they switched to Sony sensors. So there might be something special about it in the end. And it is a 12 megapixel sensor. Not a lot compared to modern cameras. For those of you who think 12 megapixels is not enough, we printed the same photo taken on a Nikon D700 and on a modern 45 megapixels beast, a Nikon Z7 II. Let's have a look. So these prints are 30 by 20 inches, so they are absolutely massive. When I'm looking at them very closely, I can see that the Nikon D700 photo is a little bit softer than the Z7 Mark II photo. There is less details, especially on the bricks on the ruins of the Priory, but take into account that they are to be admired from maybe a meter or even more. And from such a distance, there is almost no difference at all. So my conclusion is 12 megapixels is absolutely fine for even large prints. And the difference is not that noticeable when looking at the photos from, regular viewing distance. D700 has also some fairly advanced photography features. It has a decent 51-point autofocus system and can take photos in 14-bit RAWs. One of the D700's features that I really liked was the ability to use custom picture control profiles. You can use one of the ready-made ones or modify one to your taste using this clever online tool. It is not a feature exclusive to the D700, but it still gives us a lot of advanced controls over the look of the JPEGs that we're getting straight out of the camera. Another thing about the Nikon D700 is its great body design. It is a rather bulky camera weighing around 1 kilogram with a battery inside, but you get a lot for this. It lays comfortably in hand. It has a nice big optical viewfinder and a physical button on the body for almost anything you would need. It is made in a way that once set up, you very rarely have to dig into the menus to change the settings. Its direct competitor in the field of legendary cameras, the Canon 5D, has a much simpler body and won't give you such a tactile experience of using a camera. And the D700's battery just lasts forever. Compared to many modern mirrorless cameras, it's like going from a smartphone to an old mobile phone which lasted for days before running out of juice. One other useful feature of the D700 is its live view. An obvious thing for us these days, but wasn't that common in 2008. It allows you, for example, to punch in to check focus when using old manual lenses, which is very handy. Now that we know that Nikon D700 has the potential to be considered a great camera, even today, Let's put it to the test. Firstly, the legendary D700's color rendition. Nikon D700 is often compared to the 3 years older Canon 5D, so-called 5D Classic these days. The 5D was a more prosumer-oriented body, less bulky, lighter and with fewer physical controls on the body. But plenty of photographers still love it for its output. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of a photo taken with a D700 and a 5D Classic. Both are unedited JPEG files straight from the camera, taken with the same settings. And let's add the same photo taken on a modern Sony a7 III as a benchmark. Have a look if you can spot the differences. Nikon seems to have slightly lifted shadows, stronger contrast and less sharpness compared to both Canon 5D and Sony a7 III, giving its photos a bit of a velvety, soft look. Its blues are blue, while on the Canon 5D they are more cyan. Its rendering of brown, purple and blues also looks brighter. On the Canon 5D and Sony a7 III there is a gradation from bright to darker parts, while on the Nikon D700 it looks as if the tape is almost glowing. Nikon D700 seems to be exposing midtones brighter than the other cameras, which is sort of the adjustment I, for example, usually do for a more pleasing image. D700 seems to be doing it by default. It looks to me, and other reviews confirm it, that the default contrast curve on the D700 is quite steep, resulting in rather pleasing looking images, but at the cost of reduced dynamic range and risk of clipped highlights. And now let's bump the ISO really high so we can clearly see the grain. Unsurprisingly, the image is the cleanest on the Sony a7 III, although they are all quite similar in terms of the amount of noise in RAW. Canon 5D has the most prominent noise and the worst looking, at ISO 1600 in JPEG. Canon's noise is the strongest and, subjective opinion, more digital looking with a sort of pearlescent texture to it. Sony a7 III definitely has the strongest noise reduction in JPEGs, as it's almost completely clean of noise. At ISO 3200, which is the maximum 5D's ISO, it has the most luminoise with fireflies in darkest areas, which are absent on the Nikon D700's photo. In JPEG at ISO 3200, Canon 5D has a lot of color noise with artifacts and discoloration in underexposed transition areas. Nikon D700 has, it seems to me, some noise reduction applied as the noise becomes more blotchy than in RAW, although the photo is still fairly clean. So I'd say there is some truth to the claim that Nikon D700 has a pleasing looking organic noise. It appears to me like it applies a stronger reduction to the chrominance noise while leaving most of the luma noise untouched. Therefore, the noise or grain looks monochromatic and more filmic. Now, how does it handle over and underexposure? The Nikon D700 handles underexposure really well. Even the test scene underexposed by 3 stops shows some grain at ISO 200, but it is nothing terrible and still looks pleasing. Canon 5D shows much more noise when underexposed. I was surprised to see how well the D700 performs in terms of image quality even 16 years after its release. Let's see if it can be used for serious work. So Ian,
yeah,
I have a camera for you that I want you to use for the shoot today.
Oh,
I know what it is.
Nikon D700. Of course I know what this is. God, this is a phenomenal camera. In fact, I think even when the D850 had just come out, I remember there were still tons of wedding photographers when I used to do weddings that were still kind of like swore by this camera. They didn't care about the lower megapixel counts. They just love the colors and how they could just manipulate the files to make them look a certain way. So yeah, quite excited to use this today. Okay, so we've loaded up the images into Lightroom. And to be quite honest with you, as I was shooting with the camera, I was actually a little bit panicky that what I was shooting was not very good, simply because the rear LCD monitor is so bad. And when I say so bad, I mean bad compared to what we've become used to in the last kind of 5 or 6 years. In terms of color rendition. But overall, I'm really, really happy with what I'm seeing. The renditions are wonderful. They're unique in terms of rendering. There's a certain texture to them. There's a certain kind of vibe, a certain type of contrast that's kind of built into the image. They're very contrasty straight off the camera, and they almost look as if you've already applied a look, even though we actually did nothing except for white balance in camera. I think these images are very, very workable, and I think with a bit of grain and a bit of texture added, I think they can look really, really good. So overall, I'm really, really happy with what I'm seeing. See if you can hold it there. Yeah. We'll just try it. If not, we can probably get some grip to maybe do it. Already I'm seeing that the color renditions are lovely. It's a very kind of high contrast camera, I would say. It doesn't have as much dynamic range as, say, something like a Sony, but it has a certain kind of vibe that I love. It's somewhere in between early digital and film. Like, I love this one. Even when you look at the images kind of completely raw, they have like this level of, I don't know, I guess excitement I feel whenever I look at negatives. And normally you don't get that as much with digital because you know that a lot of the work has to be put in post. But with the D700, it's already kind of like almost there. It's just awesome to see these amazing digital files from a camera that is under 400 pounds and now pushing 15 to 16 years old. The images are absolutely awesome. It's just a shooting experience that kind of just takes you back a few years, and you have to kind of like become accustomed to making small adjustments with how you shoot in order to make sure that you get the shot that you want, and also make sure you have a fun experience whilst doing it.
While I was making the film-like digital cameras video, link in description, many people immediately told me you have to mention the Nikon D700. I didn't do it then, but now I see it is a strong contender to the list. So, should you buy a Nikon D700 today? Considering its price and what it can do, yes. Even today, it is still a great full-frame DSLR. Of course, it can't compete with modern mirrorless cameras when it comes to advanced features like autofocus or high ISO performance or video, because it doesn't have any video. But if you don't need all of that, why pay for the features you just won't use? Instead, you will get an amazing camera with robust body and optical viewfinder that many people love. A camera that turns on instantly and will give you beautiful photos with great color rendering and very pleasant looking grain. Also, the 12 megapixel sensor in the D700 will render softer, more organic looking images than the modern high resolution sensors. And you don't have to use the latest, sharpest lenses on it, because even some older Nikon lenses that you may have just laying around will do a great job on a D700. Just by looking at its prices, it looks like it's still in demand and holds its value quite well. Not bad for an over 15-year-old camera. What do you think about the Nikon D700? Is there something magical to it? Or is it just an old, overhyped camera? Let me know in the comments. And for now, thank you and see you next time.